Former Minister of Cooperative Development and Marketing in Kenya's Grand Coalition government, Joe Nyaga, is dead. Nyaga is said to have died while receiving treatment at the Nairobi hospital. Family sources say Nyaga died from COVID-19 related complications. Nyaga has died aged 72 years. He was a member of the then governing KANU and a minister in President Daniel Arap Moi's office until quitting both the ministry and the party in the run-up to the 2002 general elections. It will be remembered that he actually fought the election in Gashoka constituency as an opposition National Rainbow Coalition candidate. He was a member of ODM, the Orange Democratic Movement, Pentagon, in the 2007 general elections. And also remember, 10 years later in 2017, he tried vying for presidency, and successfully, of course. And we just want to send our condolences to friends, family members of the now deceased former minister. We at Standard Group equally send our condolences. May his soul rest in eternal peace. All right, so Kenya's trade agenda is fast catching international attention as the country continues to sign critical trade deals. The latest deal to be struck was with the United Kingdom. We now want to get more insight from Dan Achach, a trade law and policy expert. Welcome to Business Today, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, our viewers, and my deepest condolences to the family of the late Honorable Joe Nyaga.
All right. Thank you so much for finding time for us. So now, could you just walk us through what is the motivation behind all these trade deals that Kenya is signing with other countries, bilateral, multilateral in nature? What is the motivation?
Now, trade deals are normal occurrence for any country, and it's something that happens every day for almost all the countries. We're always negotiating new spaces for our manufacturers. We always negotiating new spaces, for our service providers. And so trade deals are normal occurrences for any country. If you look at the Kenyan landscape in terms of trade, the latest deal that has been signed by the minister was the deal between Kenya and the UK. And basically, the deal with the UK should be seen as a consequence of the post-Brexit. As we are aware, the UK previously used to trade under the European Union cover. So all the trade deals that affected the UK were the trade deals that were negotiated under the EU umbrella. But the UK has since left the EU. And so the UK is negotiating deals basically with all the trading partners. And so the deal that we saw Kenya sign with the UK should be understood in this light.
Fair enough. Now, within all those trade agreements, how do they differ from one another? How do the agreements differ from the current arrangements that were put in place?
Okay, thank you. If you starting with the deal that Kenya signed with the UK recently. Previously, as I've mentioned, Kenya's trade relations with the UK were basically based on the trade relations with the EU. And so Kenya, as a developing country, as part of the East African community, had negotiated with the EU what is known as the Economic Partnership Agreement with the EU, which basically dictated the terms under which the Kenyan products entered the UK and vice versa. But now, with the exit of the UK from the EU, that means that a new trade deal had to be signed. And if you look at the terms of the trade deal, basically what the UK is doing is that it's just trying to consolidate the gains that had been made under the EU. And so most of the trade deals that the UK has signed with Kenya, with Singapore, and with so many other countries are basically trying to, maintain the status quo, so to speak, to maintain the same terms that were there. If you look at the deal that Kenya is negotiating with the United States, for example, it's quite different. It's different in the sense that currently Kenya has a trade relationship with the US which is guided by the AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act. AGOA is what we call a unilateral scheme, basically the US allowing developing and least developed countries to gain access to their market, but under conditions that are determined by the US. And it's called unilateral because then the US has powers to decide who benefits from that kind of arrangement and who doesn't. And they can also decide when to withdraw. But the AGOA arrangement comes to an end in 2025. And therefore, Kenya is concerned that unless we do a deal with the US before 2025, then our products that are being sold or that have market in the US will not be able to have that market anymore. And so from a Kenyan perspective, that would be the motivation for Kenya. But then if you look at it from the other angle, what would be the US motivation of having an FTA with Kenya? Because if you look at Kenya, Kenya is not one of the countries you would call as an important export destination for Kenya, for the US. In fact, I think a year or 2 years ago, Kenya was ranked, I think, must be the 98th or somewhere thereabout export destination for the US. And so if you look at the motivation from the US side, the US has set its objectives to this negotiation with Kenya. And one of those objectives is that it wants to create a blueprint on how it is going to negotiate with Africa or to deal with Africa going forward. And so the US finds it easy to negotiate a trade deal with Kenya and then use that as a blueprint that would then be applied to the rest of Africa, as opposed to facing Africa as under the African Continental Free Trade Area. Of course, the other motivation one would say, if you look at the current major projects, like the infrastructure projects that have happened in Kenya, most of them are bilateral arrangements between Kenya and China. And so part of one would say that maybe the US, part of the US motivation is to neutralize, you know, the impact that the Chinese are having in Kenya and also in the rest of the continent.
We'll talk about the Chinese euphoria later, but let's say you are an expert who is advising the government. How would you advise the Kenyan government to approach some of these trade deals?
Okay. In terms of approach by the government of Kenya, it matters a lot the kind of a deal that a government signs, because the ultimate results or consequences of these deals are felt both by traders and consumers of a country. And so when Kenya negotiates a deal with the UK or the US, the ultimate consequences would be on the traders and also on the consumers in Kenya. Normally, in a trade deal or a trade negotiation, there are what we call offensive interests and defensive interests. Now, Kenya must be able to identify what is it that we want to sell to these countries that we are negotiating with, and what is it that we want to protect domestically, so that if we open up our market to these countries or to products from these countries, then within us, within Kenya, the impact is not so adverse so as to kill some of our industries. And so for Kenya, for the Kenyan government, the most important thing is to identify where are the gaps, how do we benefit? Because you see, sometimes you can negotiate a trade deal and say, oh, Kenya signed a trade deal with X and Y, but then what is the impact at the end of the day? So the only way that Kenya would benefit out of a trade deal in the nature that it's negotiating with the US, for example, is if Kenya were able to lay out clearly what is it that we want from the US. We already have AGOA. How much have we benefited from AGOA, for example? What is it that we are selling in AGOA?
Sure.
If you were to put it even in terms of percentage, have we done 50%? And if you look at the statistics, the answer to that question is no. And so we must address the gaps. Why is it that we are not able to take advantage that AGOA presents? And what can we do differently under this trade deal that would then change the perspectives and we are able to benefit more? And one of those, if you look at the Kenyan terrain in terms of trade, one of those things is what are called the constraints, the supply side constraints from Kenya. Whereas we are gaining markets under these deals, But then do we have the capacity? Do our manufacturers, do our producers have the capacity to produce products that are then able to access those markets? In most cases, the answer to that question is no. And so if I were advising the government of Kenya today, I would advise the government of Kenya that when you're negotiating a trade deal with the US, is it possible? How do you frame that agreement in a way that would attract, for example, technology transfer? That you have firms in America or in the US that would be able to set up in Kenya to do their part of their production in Kenya. How do you secure, for example, trade finance for our producers? Because part of one of the reasons that if you look at our manufacturing base, part of the reason is, of course, access to financing. How do you secure trade financing under these arrangements?
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Dan Achach. We have been speaking to Dan Achach, who is a trade law and policy expert. He was talking to us here today at KTN News about multilateral agreements, bilateral trade agreements, and the balances of trade, some of the opportunities that Kenya has, and of course how to negotiate on the table of negotiations about trade deals and so much more in terms of market access and the balances of trade of goods and commodities coming from Kenya to other countries and of course in from other countries into the country. We go back to our breaking news earlier on. Today has been a sad day for Kenya, losing two prominent people. That is one, the Machakos Senator Kabaka, and news just hit our desks here today that